All right, so we went and created a little cube here in the last video, but I don't need it, so I'm going to delete it. And I kind of want to walk you through that process properly. So I'm going to go ahead and open my Create menu. And just to show you that there's an option, if I click this little top of the menu thing there, it'll actually tear off the menu, and I can keep it floating, and you can do this with any number of menus. There is no limit. So if you find yourself going up to the menu over and over again, you can just go ahead and tear it off, and then you have access to it. So let's see, we've got NURBS primitives, which we will talk about very briefly, and then polygon primitives, which we will talk about in a little more detail here. So I'm going to go ahead and with the polygon primitives menu there selected, I get this little expanded menu here, and I'm going to just click on sphere. And here we have a polygon sphere, and it is comprised of three components. We have faces, we have edges, and then we have verts, which is where the edges come together. And if I right click on the geometry, I can switch to selection modes that will only give me the option of selecting those various components. While the object is green, I am in what is called object mode. I can only deal with this on the object level. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to select vertex, and you can see suddenly everything is a little bit different looking. We've got the edges are blue and the vertices are now visible, and the faces are not selectable, but you can see it's highlighting these verts as I move around, and if I want I can grab one or several and they are now selected. So we're not going to worry too much about what you can do once you've selected them. I just kind of want to show you how object mode works versus component mode, and you can either right click, I'm sorry, this is right click on the geo, not off of the geo. I guess off the geo works too. Look at that. Okay, learn something every day. So anyway, right click anywhere in the UI and then go back to object mode, and you are back to the dealing with this thing as a solid piece of geo. And one more thing that's worth mentioning, because I'm probably just going to do it automatically without thinking, is move, scale, and rotate, W, E, and R. The hotkeys here, you can see we've got our menu items over here. I never ever use these. I always just use W, E, and R. It's very, very common to find these hotkeys in various 3D applications. So my advice is probably just get used to using them. So with W, that's move. If I want, and you can see obviously I've got little arrows here. I can scoot this thing along the axis of the arrow, or you can grab it in the middle and you have sort of a free reign of movement there. Control Z is undo. You can very simply go back in time if you want. And then E is rotate, same kind of deal. So we can rotate on the axes here. And this blue ring is basically rotating perpendicular to the camera. So if you imagine a line from the camera to the center of the selection, this is going to be rotating around that line. So it's view dependent. And then we've got scale, which is R, and same exact idea, right? Like it's we shouldn't have too much trouble comprehending how all this stuff is working. And you can see what's going on as I make modifications here to the transforms. These are called transforms. So we have translate, which is move, rotate, which is rotation, and then scale. Obviously that is scale. So if I want, I can actually set the values over here. I can select multiple values and hit enter, and the object will take those new values. If I type 1, I have just moved this 1 unit over in X positive. You can also do negative values like so. Go ahead and just zero that out. And you may notice that you can have a lot of zeros in translate rotate, but scale needs to be 1. If you set scale to 0, it's basically going to go away, and that's not really what you're looking for most of the time, because all that geometry still exists. It's just all in an infinitely small spot and not doing a whole lot of good for anybody. Okay, so that is a little bit of an aside on move, rotate, and scale, and object mode versus component mode. So again, right click to get to vertex, and there's edges. You can select edges as well. Talk a little bit more about edges at some point. I was actually intending to talk about creating primitives, so that's kind of what we're going to spend the next few minutes on. So I've created this sphere. You can change anything that you want about the sphere when you create it. by going to the options. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it. We'll go back to the polygon primitive sphere, and this little box here, if I click there, will give me my sphere options. So radius, that's going to give me a radius of 1. Let me go ahead and just create it with these defaults here. So the grid here, each little square is 1 unit, and you can set what those units actually represent, centimeters or inches or whatever in the preferences. We're not going to worry about that. Whatever the default is totally fine for now. That's more relevant if you're exporting to a game engine or some other application where you need to be cognizant of whatever the scale that it is expecting is. So you can also change the number of subdivisions on around or vertically. That's the axis is horizontal and height is, sorry, I think the other way around. Axis is vertical and height is horizontal. And then some other things here that are useful, but maybe not worth mentioning right this minute. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the test sphere, and we'll just go ahead and change some things around just to sort of show you what I'm talking about here. So if we say like 0.5, we make that sphere. Now we can see we've got 10 vertical subdivisions and 30 horizontal subdivisions, and the radius has been reduced to 0.5. Well, what if you create it and you want to change your mind? You can very easily do that in the channel box. Each object, by default, when you create it, is going to have what's called construction history. So if I click on my polysphere 1 as the input, you can see I have most of that same stuff, right? So if I come over here and say 20, you can see it's updating, and maybe I say 10 over there, and we'll make the radius like 2, right? So you can change all that stuff once you're actually looking at the geometry if you want. So there are the options. You can create initial values, and then you can go into the inputs and change the geometry's inputs after that. Now, one of the things that we'll be doing a lot is when you do a lot of operations on things, you will delete the construction history, because if you can have performance issues if you have a ton of different things, because basically it's preserving every operation that you've made, and also many of the operations have ingredients and you can modify those. So it's just basically hauling around an awful lot of extra stuff that you don't need, and it's ideal to go ahead and get rid of that stuff. So that would remove the ability to change this. And also, I think once you get in and start doing things, like if I were to sort of come over and I think I can just extrude this face or something, you don't have to worry about this for now. Once that's done, I may be able to come in and change this, but it might break. Nope, it was happy with that. Okay, and then I go to my poly extrude face. And well, it looks like, oh, there we go. So now we've extruded another face. So that's one of those things where the construction history, you can run into suboptimal results if you get in and start messing with things. So anyway, that's a little bit more advanced. We don't have to worry about that too much. I just kind of want to give you an idea that you can modify stuff over here, and that there is some garbage collection that you may need to do from time to time as you are working through those operations. So that is a sphere. We can look at the cube options. You can see I don't get another menu here. There's just the options for that object, and we'll hit apply here. Same idea, right? If I wanted to, you can come over here and change stuff after the fact, or you can, let me go ahead and we'll just make this like 2, and then subdivisions. We can do something similar over here. Right, oops, I went into a different viewing mode. If you tap the 1 key, that's just your regular old polygons. If you tap the 2 key, that's going to give you your polygon frame, and also what is called the subdivision version, which is where it's basically just smoothing. And if you tap the 3 key, then you will get just the sub D version. So if you do this on accident, when you're trying to tap the W, E, and R, it's very easy to do. Just tap the 1 key and you will go back to your geometry. So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. In the next video, we will talk about some of the rest of these primitives and what you can do with them.